excuse the kids' toys and all that, but here is a deck I built, designed and built. This deck is really an extension of our living space. We just have an old house. Dining room is right there, so we've got a covered deck that was outside of that when we bought the place and wanted to redo it in the same style, but got sort of going with this theme of how to optimize the life of a deck in the West Coast climate, and how to maximize the value of the deck by creating dry space underneath, so waterproof decks. So went down the rabbit hole of how do you do that, and lots of ideas about just how to waterproof a traditionally built deck, as in like building from wood, cedar or whatever for the decking, and then having like a waterproof membrane underneath that catches all the water and directs it to a channel at the edge of the deck. And then of course the other option that, is literally bolted to every $1.5 million, $2 million house in this area is just a vinyl deck, which, if you know the cost of doing vinyl decks, it's not a product that I can get behind. It's just like a big plastic heat welded sheet that like is fully exposed to UV, freeze thaw, everything. Like they just don't last longer than, I don't know, in this climate, like 15, 20 years. And then the costs associated with that, and the fact that you end up with just like you're looking at and walking on a vinyl deck. Like I like wood decks. I was really pushing for wood, but the waterproofing options below the decking just didn't always seem kind of hokey, and having a background in roofing myself, at least in the sales and kind of project management of roofing projects, one of the things that I know a lot of people find really valuable is can the underside, like basically the underside of this deck could become formal living space because it has a 2-ply roof membrane under this porcelain tile. So ultimately we got going in this direction, and then my wife looked up some architectural magazines of railings that are going into nice houses, so I had to figure out how to build a railing as well without breaking the bank. But I think what I ended up with is a pretty valuable end product, like a pretty bomb-proof deck for the West Coast, or Pacific Northwest in general, in terms of durability, cleanability, lifespan. Like the membranes below the porcelain tiles will go eventually, but there's no UV light exposed, or they're not exposed to any UV light, and it is a 2-ply system. So you're kind of in the like for sure 30 years, 40, 50 years, that system should be okay without any incidents. And if not longer, like I looked at roofs that were anything covered, 60 years even before. And then the bitumen membranes just eventually dry out anyways, even if there's no UV light, just from freeze thaw and just deteriorating over time. So nothing lasts forever, but to get 50 plus years out of it, hopefully, is a big thing. And to be able to put living space under that is a big thing if we ever decide to do that. But for now, it'll be my shop down there. But anyways, with vinyl decks, it's also like you can't have living space under the deck. So as you can tell, I've thought a lot about this. And then building the deck is a whole nother process, but just the design of this deck, and then I'm just about to start the actual sort of final designs for the other deck on our house, which is around the front, and it just an open air deck, but it will have the same basic system build up with sort of the 2.0 tweaks from this one. And it's actually be a lot easier to build, and yeah, even more durable and bomb proof in the end. So I guess over the next couple weeks here, as I finalize designs and actually get going on that one, I think that's my next project after the fence gets in. But so I kind of need to be coming up to that 2-3 weeks before I'm actually complete there. So, or ready to dig foundations anyways. So through this design process, for me, the last couple of years, like this whole starting of a build company to do greenhouses and etc., it's not so much about me needing to do those projects. It's me testing ideas, right? Like I spent 10 years in the consulting world and never really got to build much. And so coming out of that, I need to be building and testing ideas and figured out how to make both buildings and landscapes to the design that I want to for other future endeavors of mine. But where am I going with this? I love the process of designing and building. Like the motto of the company I came up with was built to last with natural materials. I was also considering just build with nature, but it's really about like the mindset of like, how do you, not necessarily purist on the natural material side. Like I've used these tiles or porcelain. The roof membrane is the bitumen, like roofing asphalt membrane. It's got plywood decking because you need it for the membrane. Like it's not completely on the ethos of like all natural materials and all that, but it is built in a way that to me maximizes the functionality of the natural materials that are used and the man-made materials. Therefore, is the least harmful, at least to its overall impact in terms of how do you put together a building, and in this case just a deck. But I mean, decks matter, and outdoor living space is just as important to me as indoor living space. So I kind of got the idea that rather than trying to sell people on me building these decks or building the greenhouses, was just to be more on the design side and just share my ideas, and then also the builds and the actual feedback from those designs, so that my process of iteration in terms of building real construction skills using natural materials gets refined as quickly as possible by putting it out into the public and having other people just interact with that and give ideas or give criticism that I can use to further refine my learning and accelerate my learning. So I'm going to be sort of documenting the whole design process of this next deck, the porcelain paver sort of 50-year deck 2.0, and then packaging that together in some sort of a video and maybe a PDF list of like the design process that you could go through to put together a deck like this, and what materials to use, how to DIY as much as you can, and where to hire people or where to buy what you need, which for me would have saved dozens, probably even 100 hours of research and thinking, because you can obviously pay a contractor to build a deck for you just like this, but this is the square footage I've got here is probably, well, with the railing system too, it's for sure a $50,000-$60,000 deck, if not more. And I'm 99% sure I'm going to put together some comparison budgets for this next deck, but I'm like 99% sure that this deck was cheaper for me than it would have been to build, like, say a vinyl, like still building it myself, but hire someone to heat weld the vinyl and then put on like a Peak Railing Systems Home Depot kind of kit railing with glass panels. I think that I did this deck for cheaper, and probably, I mean, there's some more man hours, but lots of people have time to DIY projects. It's just more about, like, to me, it's more about how do you spend the money that you're spending. I think this was cheaper and obviously a far nicer product and longer lasting product than the alternative. And so the design guide's basically to get all the learning that I had with this deck packaged up and basically pass that on to save all that time and headache for someone else. So I'm going to do it hopefully to the spec that more or less someone could take the info and do it themselves, or hire a contractor to do it for them to spec, without really having to ask me more questions. So I'll try and literally put it all in there, and I think my brother's going to build the same kind of deck, so maybe he can be the first beta tester to see if there's actually enough info in there and it works to actually design the whole deck. And then I think as I build, I'm going to try and document the whole thing, like actually down to how do you source rough sawn lumber from local mills, how do you grade that if you buy like a bulk, say you just buy a tree, or you have a tree and you get it milled, so you have just an assortment of lumber. How do you self kind of grade it well enough to find your beams, find your joists? That'll all kind of be that. And then even the railings, like how do you put together, like, I guess maybe I spent all of, I don't know, $200 on tools, and I fabbed all the raw pieces up for the railing, and then didn't actually end up welding it myself. But even just to be able to fab that all up, you know, saves at least $1,000, couple grand for a fabricator to cut all the pieces, drill all the holes, because there's a shit ton of holes for a cable railing. That'll be kind of the next build series. And then, yeah, I think that will be something I'll try and, again, just package up. That'll be definitely at a much higher price point, because it's going to take ages for me to figure out how to film that all, but I think it's cool. I would love to be able to like leave that for, well, maybe for my kids' we'll say, because I'll definitely teach my kids all of this. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do. This company that I kind of tried to start, built one greenhouse and like got a job since, was supposed to be my kind of jumping off point to self-employment, but it's really tough, and to go after jobs and to be on the level to build for other people is, I think, maybe a future step, or maybe something that I want to get involved in later. But the sort of financial reality behind my current situation is like I'm trying to spend as much time as I can with my kids. That's basically what it boils down to. I want to hang out with my kids all day, all summer. And I still want to do something in the world that provides value in a real tangible sense that the type of feeling that I didn't get at my last job. And so my hope is that by sharing these videos and the sort of more digital nature to this project or concept, my hope is that I will create some financial stability for my family and help to pay for this aging house that needs a lot of work. We've kind of been pouring ourselves into this house for 5 years now, and it's tough to see the value of all of that. It's tough to even remember what it was like when we bought it, but I need to be spending time close to home and building projects close to home, and so sharing my knowledge and how I've done these things and what I build and what's most interesting to me in the design side, and how do you utilize natural products, natural materials, but make those, don't just romanticize it, actually do it in a way that is durable, long lasting, and the overall best use of resources on our planet, rather than just kind of a, I feel like there's no or very little that's not super traditional construction skills, or how do you do it as cheap as possible for kind of house flipping. Like, we don't want to sell this house. We want to own it long term. So how do you put together a house and property that lasts long term, that is serviceable, is still healthy and beautiful to be in, and makes the most of bringing you, as you live in the house, closer to nature, which is ultimately what we love about our house. Like, it's that close. So if you're at all interested in doing a deck like this deck, in the future, greenhouses, natural ecosystem ponds, water systems, site renewable energy systems, food forests, animals, the whole homesteading kind of thing, but done with this flavor of how do we make all these things work for us, and how do we design regenerative living systems that, as we live in them, the natural world around us gets better in a sort of holistic sense, like both in the structure we're living in how we're interacting with our landscape, how we're, collecting and storing and actually revitalizing the water system, even if it's only on our little half-acre lot. How if we have, say, trees that are not well suited for the property or not in the right spots for the property, like how do you think about the best use for those natural resources in terms of how do you fall them, how do you get them milled, or how do you mill them yourself, how do you use them in your house. Like, this whole ethos of kind of regenerative living was the thing that I kind of stumbled into when I met my wife, and one of the things that I really love about her is that not only did she introduce that to me, but she's just passionate about how do we get better, get closer to living a natural way, away from all the sort of consumerism and destructive, resource extractive ways that we live, and to a more harmonious version, but not without finding our place in that, like not removing ourselves from nature so that we suffer as a result, but actually designing a system that takes care of us too, like provides abundance for us, nourishes us, restores us, helps us heal. And I don't think there's anything more important that we as parents can work on than that for our kids. Like, think of all the ways I could spend a career doing different things, chasing money or working for money, call it. I guess I've never really chased money, but I've worked for money a lot. Like, none of it's going to matter if we keep going down the road of dominance over nature and we can control everything. If there's not new thinking that allows us to become a part of nature again, I guess I got to go all the way into it to really explain my point of view here. But there's two ways I see, two paths for our kids I see in the future and their generation. I mean, not just them as individuals, but their generation. The one path will be to continue on the technological route of always just reciting the motto, technology is the future, and yes, I'm ready to plug myself in, and yes, I'm ready to upload my brain to something, and yes, I'm ready to download all the knowledge that humans have ever had into my brain and never think about trying to learn something ever again. And yes, I'm willing to outsource all of my creativity to a machine as long as it takes care of me. And then the other path is, okay, if we're going to survive this, and if there's definitely going to be people on path one, we better sure as hell make sure that the way we're living is such a good example to the other people that they can't help but just keep jumping off to spend the rest of their lives working and interacting with nature all around them, and in whatever capacity that is. We're definitely blessed to have this spot, this half acre, and the location it's in and the beauty that we can see here. And that's something that we hope to share with other people going forward here. But these principles and this way of thinking can really apply anywhere. You know, the only places I can think where it hardly apply is living in high rises in cities. But it's not to say there's anything wrong with that, but the path would involve many more people living more dispersed over the surface of the earth. and deriving a living and nourishment from the land closer to them. Like, you know, they talk about 100 mile diet or whatever these kind of concepts are. Yeah, I mean, the more local it can be, the more you know it's going to be resilient, and it's also going to need to be regenerative in the way that it increases the life in the soil, in the water system, in the microclimate, or whatever you're creating, in terms of how you sustain yourself, and then provide an economic living for yourself. And I say that with hesitation, because the more you go into this world, the more you do not need sort of the economic involvement in the quote unquote real world. Like, if you can get everything you need and all the experiences that you need and all the food that you need within your local community, and you do something in your local community that provides value to it, then yeah, I mean, short of taxes, how many other things do you need to be paying for? And so that's the future that we want for our kids. We want them to be living in this real world, living with nature, being as nature, like being a part of nature. So the only way to do that, as far as I can see it, is to live that way, and to not also live that way tomorrow, but to live that way today. So yeah, I may not be as financially well set working with my hands and working in the real world as I was before working in the digital world. But it's an example to my son that, you know, there is an alternative to the computers, essentially, and the lines of work that flow out of computers. Because to me, those, well, not, I don't know. I don't want to say that I'm just against them, because that's a personal view. It wasn't healthy for me to work 8 hours a day at a computer. That's my body. That's my mind. It made me unhealthy to do so, although I rode my mountain bike a lot, so I didn't necessarily get super unhealthy in a traditional sense, but my body was unhealthy, my mind was unhealthy. I couldn't progress. I felt stuck because of my sedentary job, sort of sitting at a computer every day. And so I realized that even in my current role, there's an element of computer work that needs to be done, and I'm happy to interact with computers, but my goal is to be really building, like doing stuff with my hands, and whether or not that's all the grunt work forever is up for discussion. But I don't know. I'm just thinking about the future for my kids, and just trying to be a good role model for them in a way to show them that we're here, we're nature. It's in your nature to be that way, to want to work with nature. Everybody that grasps these concepts knows that they are right, or knows that they are ideal. But a lot of people are just stuck kind of, I mean, as I was too, and still could be if I'd made a different decision, but just stuck, you know. You have the mortgage, you have the financial responsibilities, and you need to keep running on the wheel in order to keep all those balls floating. And I get that now more than ever, as I'm sitting essentially broke with the mortgage renewing. And but I spent a lot of time with my kids, and I'm going to keep doing that. And I know that that is the way. Like, we need our communities close to home. We need our families close to home. We need our jobs close to home. We need our food close to home. And we need our experiences, our escapes, our nourishment, our wellness rituals close to home. There's no reason they can't be. Like, the further we go from a one world government, and the closer we get to 1 billion community governments, I think the world will be a better place. It will be more enjoyable to live in. And that's the kind of future I want for my kids. I've got to go build a fence. Until next time.